A lot of you ask me, what is the best luxury motor coach brand out there? And sometimes I try to relate motor coach quality and value to automobiles. So I was thinking about the different motor coaches and what automobile companies they are most like. So today I wanted to give you guys a list of the top luxury motor coach companies and let you know what automobile companies I think they're most like. And we'll start right at the top. I'm gonna talk about Liberty Coach. I would compare Liberty Coach to a Bugatti. It's gonna be the most exclusive, the most expensive. It's kind of like a Bugatti. The Liberty coaches are mostly built for couples coaches. They're built for two people. A lot of the other motorhome brands we see do a lot more bunk models and other stuff. And I know Liberty Coach has done some other stuff, but most of their floor plans are going to be couples coaches, and I think Liberty is the most refined motor coach from the exterior to the interior, the way they hold up over time. I think Liberty Coach is the most exclusive motor coach. Now, next we're going to talk about Newell Coach. Newell Coach is right there in that same level, and I would compare Newell Coach to like a Rolls Royce. Newell Coach is going to have more headroom, more living space, some really cool designs where Rolls Royce, they've got the Cullinan, they've got the bigger models, you know, the drop head, the Phantom, the Ghost. They're kind of big, very identifiable, and extremely refined. But I would say I've been in Rolls Royces and I've been in Bugattis. I used to detail both of them. We might be able to find some pictures. I've had a lot of opportunities to care for some of the finest cars in the world. I actually was at the Bugatti Divo release. I think that was around 2018, where I was actually one of the guys holding down the cover over the Bugatti Divo at the unveiling. And I will say that Bugatti is a little more refined than a Rolls Royce when you look at just some of the real close fit and finish. You know, both are just at the top of the food chain, but I'm going to call Newell Rolls Royce, Liberty Coach Bugatti. And one of my other favorite motor coaches is going to be Emerald Luxury Coaches, which I'm going to compare to a Porsche. You know, Emerald's got that really cool, sleek styling. That Prevost shell, the drivability of a Prevost reminds me of being on rails, and I think that's why I've probably compared the two Prevost conversions to more sports cars. And Porsche is a very simple design, you know, not as many bells and whistles, but they're very reliable. I read an article a few years ago that Porsche was one of the most reliable vehicles on the road, and I know Emerald builds a very reliable, simple coach. So I would compare Emerald Luxury Coaches out of Stephenville, Texas to Porsche. And then talking about another up-and-coming brand in the Prevost industry, Low-Key Coach is really making a name for themselves. The Motor Coach store here in Bradenton, Florida is a Low-Key dealer. They've got some really cool models coming out. So I would compare a Low-Key Coach to a Rivian. Rivian's a new up-and-coming company with a lot of really cool features. You know, the Low-Key Coach is doing stuff like you press a button and the sofa turns into a bed. They're doing a lot of stuff that nobody else is doing with some cool exterior lighting on the belt rails that I haven't seen any other Prevost converter do. But they still are a newer company, so making a name for themselves, but still very tech friendly and very tech savvy. There's an electric charging station for electric cars in the Low-Key Coach. So I'm gonna compare Low-Key to Rivian, both kind of newer companies, but really making a name for themselves in both industries. One of my other favorite Prevost converters is Millennium Luxury Coaches, and I'm going to compare them to Bentley. They do a lot of really cool stuff. They have a really cool style. I know they, you know, recently built like a non-slide X, where, you know, Bentley has the Integra, they've got a convertible, they've got a sedan, they've got quite a few models. And Millennium does convert the X model Prevost as well as the H model Prevost, and Emerald Luxury Coaches does convert X's, so I didn't want to leave them out in that comparison with Porsche. But Emerald also does, you know, bunk models, a lot of cool stuff like Millennium. But, you know, Millennium is a very refined, they've got a lot of cool bells and whistles. Nelson from Millennium came from the aviation industry and has brought a lot of that technology over into the motor coach side, and just a really high-end coach. I'm gonna compare Millennium Luxury Coaches to Bentley. And then next, Featherlight Coaches. I'm going to compare to Mercedes-Benz. They've got, you know, just a really cool feel, and, you know, even in the automotive industry, I sometimes put Mercedes-Benz right next to Bentley and Rolls-Royce in terms of quality. I like a lot of the tech they do. Featherlight doesn't build quite as many coaches as some of the other converters, but really cool styling. And I know they've used some of those AMG air conditioning vents in some of their coaches, which kind of reminds me of that Mercedes-Benz styling. And I know Jimmy Adams and the team at Featherlight are heavily involved in the racing community. I probably would have given them Porsche if Emerald Luxury Coaches hadn't already taken it, but we're going to compare Featherlight to Mercedes-Benz. It's on the Prevost chassis, Prevost shell. The Prevost shell is going to be the safest in the industry with that semi-monocoque construction. When talking about Featherlight, we can't leave out Epic Motorcoach. I'm going to compare Epic Motorcoach to McLaren. Kind of a newer up and coming, you haven't seen a lot of them, but they do build a really cool coach. And we've been hearing a lot of positive feedback on Epic Motorcoach. That's kind of a sister company to Featherlight. That's a little more price point conscious Prevost conversion. They build the X's, and the Prevosts remind me of a sports car, the way they have that very connected stance with the ground when you're driving. So we're going to compare Epic to McLaren. And another one of my favorite motor coach companies is For Travel Motor Coach. I'm going to compare them to BMW. They've got a lot of really cool features, really cool styling, and For Travel is really in their own lane, building on the Spartan K4 chassis with the HWH slide rooms, with some really cool floor plans, really cool designs. They don't build a ton of them, but they've kind of got that European styling. So we're going to compare For Travel to a BMW. And of course, we've got to talk about Numar. So to me, Numar is going to remind me of a Cadillac, all American made. They're going to be on either the Spartan or the Freightliner chassis. And I think one of the reasons I'm comparing a lot of the different Prevost converters to the foreign companies is the Prevost shells are built in Canada. So there is a, little international barrier there. So technically the Prevosts are going to be more of an imported vehicle. And I think that's why I'm comparing them to the imports. But the Numar product is going to remind me of like a Cadillac, especially an Escalade. If you're in a King Air, a Cadillac Escalade, the looks of it is going to rival any of the more expensive foreign cars out there. And then the look of these new King Airs rivals any motor coach out there as well, but they're just not quite as refined as what you're going to find in like a Bentley or a Rolls-Royce or Mercedes. Cadillac is still a beautiful machine, but not quite as expensive, and they build a great overall product. And talking about Numar, we got to go right to the parent company of Numar is Winnebago. And I'm going to compare them to either GM or Chevrolet, just that connection with Cadillac. Winnebago does build some really cool coaches, not as much in the diesel pusher side. That's going to be more the Numars, but I'm going to call Winnebago like the Chevy GM. And talking about other production motor coaches out there, Tiffen to me is going to compare to Lincoln. Still a really cool rig, like the Lincoln Navigator is going to be like the Tiffen Allegro bus, still awesome, but not quite as expensive and not quite as refined as a Cadillac Escalade would be. The same thing going to the Numar King Air. It's going to be a little bit of a step up, but then they also make a ton of other really cool models. And the parent company of Tiffen is going to be Thor Motor Coach, which I would consider more of like a Ford product. Your more basic, more entry level, more affordable stuff. And now I'm running out of companies for Integra, because I really like Integra and I like making that American association, but I'm going to throw it up a little bit. I'd say Integra reminds me of a Lexus, just a super simple build, super beautiful, very reliable, dependable. And now Integra is going to be having their manufacturing go to Red Bay, Alabama. So we'll see what happens in the future with Integra. I'm really looking forward to seeing those first next model year Integras that are coming out of Alabama, and I want to see how they are in build quality compared to the other Integras we've seen that came out of Indiana. And of course, I know a lot of you Prevost people are out there asking, why have I forgotten about Marathon Coach? We have not forgotten about Marathon Coach. I'm going to put Marathon Coach as the Ferrari. Again, that Prevost shell is that real grounded with the road feel, so I like comparing the different Prevost converters to the sports cars. And Ferrari is kind of a timeless sports car. Same thing with Marathon Coach. It's just a very well-known brand. A lot of Marathon owners are very loyal, the same way Ferrari owners are very loyal, and it still extremely refined coach. You know, Ferrari, in my opinion, is not quite as refined as a Bugatti is. I don't think a Marathon coach is as refined as a Liberty coach is. But Marathon coach does build a lot more coaches every year, the same way Ferrari builds a lot more cars every year than Bugatti. So, you know, I'm trying to come up with the best comparisons, and these are just me kind of making comparisons. So I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. Did I get it right? Did I miss some? Should some have been different? Are there any other car companies that you think would be a better representation of some of these motor coach companies? I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. I greatly appreciate all of you subscribing to the channel and liking these videos, and hope you're all having a great day. Thanks again.